Hi there, welcome to our second evening of Ducks in a Row. This is care planning and your medical advanced care plan meeting. Here we go. Hi everyone. Welcome back to some of you. It's so great to see some returning faces and new faces. I'm Tracy Sprower. I am the education manager at Met-How at Home. And tonight's getting our ducks in a row that's centered around advanced care planning and planning for our care is a big collaborative effort. There's been a Met-How Valley Advanced Care Planning Group that's had members from multiple organizations. We've been meeting for over 4 years. And so I'm going to do a few shout outs. We've got Met-How at Home represented. Betsy Weiss is with the Lookout Coalition. Raise your hand, Betsy. We have Stephanie Foster from Room 1. And we have Karen and Sheila that are from Okanagan Palliative Care. And we have our faithful Marisa Monteverde, who's joining us, Tony Cabina, Ernest Cabina, and Jocelyn Murray. And there's Jocelyn. We're all very passionate about advanced care planning, and we're so happy that you all are here. Thank you. And Kathy Merwin. Kathy is from Met-How at Home, and she made the soup, so thank you. And I just want to give a big shout out and thanks to Room 1 for hosting these 3 weeks of events. It's really been special to be able to come into their new meeting space, and Stephanie organized last week's lineup and did an amazing job. And you can see that recording if you weren't here on Met-How at Home's YouTube channel. So welcome everybody. I am curious, raise your hand if you have ever heard of National Healthcare Decisions Day. Nobody? Oh, Sheila knows it. Sheila, what is National Healthcare Decisions Day?
It's a day to contemplate for yourself decisions that you might want made for you in the event of a health emergency or a change in your health condition. Plus, it encourages you to talk to your family and friends about those decisions.
So thanks for being here to be starting the conversation, or maybe it's not a start of this conversation for you, but maybe it will be a deepening of understanding the variety of things to think about when you're putting together your advanced directive that you maybe don't have time to go over with your primary care provider. And so we really believe in the power of community coming together, asking questions, learning from each other's experiences, and doing a lot of this work together. So thank you so much for being here. I also, before I forget, I have all the list of things. It's hard to remember it all. I do want to honor the we are on the ancestral homelands of the Met-How people. And so just a note of respect and honor that it's a beautiful responsibility and a privilege to be able to live here in this fantastic Met-How Valley. A couple of other things. We've got bathrooms to either side. Will there be a break in tonight's program? Yes. There will be a short break in tonight's program. If anything crazy happens, Tyler Slostad, our resident teacher, is gonna help you file out this back glass door over here. We're not thinking that that's going to be the case, but just in case. And without any further ado, we have 4 speakers tonight. We're going to start off with Karen Jacobson. She's going to talk to us about advanced care planning in the PULSE form. Sheila's going to be talking to us about palliative care and hospice. And we've got Mallory Taylor, who's going to be talking to us about in-home care options. And thanks to Andy DeRozier for coming all the way from Tonasket. Did you come all the way? Thank you, Andy, from Aging and Adult Care, which is a wonderful resource and office that you can connect with over in OMAC.
Wow.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you, Tracy. I'm Karen Jacobson, and I am part of the palliative care team. Speak louder. Part of the palliative care team in Okanagan County, and along with Sheila, there are 5 of us. And later in the program, Sheila will explain what palliative care is. But my role tonight is to introduce the concept of advanced care planning. So I'm just curious, can you raise your hand if you've already completed an advanced directive? Okay, quite a few people here. And I hope this isn't too redundant for you, but I think I just want to remind all of you that, or let you all know that completing a directive is a really important first step, but it's an active process, so that once you've completed it, it's good to review it whenever there's a change in your health, or whenever after a decade or so, if it's it might be time to check it out, just like you would with any other legal documents. So advanced. First I wanted to start by reading you a Native American prayer out of this book that is written by his name is Stephen Charleston, and he's a member of the Choctaw Nation. It's a blessing, and I just wanted to do that as an introduction because it helps to ground me. I get a little nervous when I'm speaking in front of people, and so please bear with me. All things come and go. Be at peace on this blessed day, whether it brings sunlight or storms, serenity or struggle. Be at peace in passing through it, doing what needs to be done, living as fully as you can, as authentically as you can, at peace in your soul. Know that all things come and go on the way to where you are called to be. They pass around you, they pass over and under you, but they do not define you or contain you. For your life is not an inventory of pains or pleasures, but a sonnet of the Spirit, a mystery fashioned from and for eternity, a strength so powerful that it can afford to be vulnerable to love. Be at peace on this blessed day. Okay, so advanced care planning, I'm going to use notes so I don't forget anything. It's about making personal decisions about your health care ahead of time. So thinking towards the future, as Sheila was saying, to a situation that could occur to any of us at any age, where a sudden change of health, where you might not be able to speak for yourself. An advanced directive the purpose of it is that you have written down and shared with others what your wishes would be in a situation like that. What kinds of medical care you would want, and what kind of care in general you would want that would support your values and your goals in your life. So some of the questions that you would want to consider in developing your advanced directive are: what kinds of things are important to you in your life? If you were not able to do the things that you enjoy, would there be any medical interventions that would be too much? What fears do you have about getting sick or about medical care? What considerations do you make when deciding about medical care? If you had to choose between living longer or having a higher quality of life, which would you choose? How important is it for you to be at home when you die? So these are examples of some of the questions that are part of the considerations that you use when you're making decisions. And so as you can see, there's a lot of thought that goes into creating one of these plans, and it's a process. It's not something you do as a homework assignment in one day and all by yourself, but you want to involve the other people in your life. So the number one reason we do it is not for ourselves as much as it is for those that we're close with. The person that you might choose as your healthcare agent to speak for you if you're not able to speak for yourself. So that's the first step in developing an advance directive, is considering who is it in your life that you would trust to be your advocate in a situation where you can't speak for yourself. And some people have told me, well, I wouldn't choose my spouse because he wouldn't follow my directions. And so, that's a consideration. Like, you can pick anyone. You can pick a good friend. You can pick your niece or your nephew if you feel close enough to them that you feel like they would support you. And then the important thing, the next step is then to communicate with them that you're asking them to do that for you, to be your representative. And then to have a conversation with them about that. To say, these are what my wishes are. I've chosen the A, B, and C, and these are how I would like to be treated in this kind of situation. Would you be able to carry my wishes out? Today I talked to someone in the clinic who told me a great story about how she learned from a friend that her friend's father had passed away recently, and he had completed an advance directive. In fact, he had completed it with me. And her friend told her, yeah, we followed that advance directive. And he was able to have his wishes carried out. So that was an encouraging story for me to hear, because I do, in being in the medical world, I hear a lot of stories from people about tragedies that have happened where a relative or a friend has ended up in a situation where they had medical interventions that they didn't want. And I'm sure some of you have heard these kinds of stories or experienced these with friends or family where nobody thought about it ahead of time, and then suddenly there's a situation where your health has changed, and you land in a hospital or a nursing home or on some kind of medical support that may not be what that person had been wanting. So advance directives are really for the purpose of trying to help support the person's values and goals. Okay, let's see. I just wanted to use myself as an example of a person who has avoided talking about these issues most of my life. And fortunately, I've had pretty good health, but in my family, it was kind of a taboo subject to talk about healthcare issues and conditions, and it was kind of a whispered kind of a thing, and that hasn't really served me very well, because I haven't been able to be very helpful in the past with family and friends who have had health conditions. So in the last 5 years that I've been helping with advance directives, I myself have learned a lot about this process and learned about how we as family members and friends need to be connecting with each other and supporting each other when we have these issues arising, and have conversations around the dinner table about what our wishes, what our values and wishes are. for some families, that's a normal thing and they do it all the time. You know, I talk to some people, I'm kind of amazed by that. But I think as a culture, we have a tendency to avoid talking about those hard subjects. So now's the time. Now's the time to start it. Another example I wanted to give is of, for me, was many years ago, I was at the bedside of my mother-in-law, who was 98 years old and she was dying. She had suddenly declined from a bad fall, and then she had become unconscious, and so she was in the hospital with a respirator. And all the family gathered to be with her at her bedside, and the medical team was saying, okay, asking the family, what should we do? Should we disconnect her from this care, which means that she will pass, or do you want us to have her continue? Well, nobody had ever asked her that question. Nobody had ever had that conversation with her. And so that the family didn't really know, and everybody was shrugging their shoulders, like, what do we do? Fortunately, that in that situation, the family was able to come to an agreement about it and make a decision. But I've heard of many times situations where families disagree and they fight about who's right and who's wrong, and we should do this or we should do that, and it can become a very painful, awful experience for everyone, including the person who's in that bed. And so this is the reason why we need to do these, because we need to have some clarity about what our wishes are ahead of time, to avoid that and to give that gift to our family, the gift of the knowledge of what we would want. 5 minutes? Okay, thank you. Choosing a healthcare agent, I've already covered that. It's the same, the other word for that is a proxy, the legal term for that. So you may have heard that before, and you may have also heard that the term durable power of attorney for healthcare, which is a legal term that is used, often when you're developing your will. That's part of developing a will, and it's a similar, kind of the same thing, really. If you've already had your will done and you've named your your power of attorney for healthcare, then you already have named your proxy. But the advance directive goes farther than that. It makes more specific recommendations for your healthcare. It doesn't just designate one person, but it gives that person more information. So that would be, your healthcare agent would be the same as your power of attorney for healthcare. I hope that's clear. So it's a document. The advance directive is a document, and the one that we use is authorized by the state of Washington, and it's a 4-page document. And it's really not difficult to complete. It's a pretty simple process. The hard part is making sure you're getting down what your wishes are. So you've named your healthcare agent, then you write down what your values, what makes life meaningful for you, what's a good day look like for you, and then connecting that to what your wishes would be regarding care, whether you want, you have options on the form, the document, of what kinds of care you might choose. And then it's a document, in order for it to be legalized, it needs to be signed or signed and then witnessed or notarized. And so you can have 2 witnesses sign it as and that makes it a legal document, or you can have it notarized. All of us who were named earlier as the people who have been helping in this valley with advanced directives can help, are available to help you if you're interested in that. And I have set up a meeting here in this room on May 16th at 2:00 for anybody who wants to come, and we can go through the document together. I'm also happy to help you individually. If you'd like me to meet with you privately to go over it, I'm happy to do that too, either on the phone or in person. So the documents, I brought the documents and they're here. Thank you very much. This is what they look like. They're in this hallway right here. I've attached my card so you can call me. The number's on there. And so you're welcome to take one with you tonight to have a look at it. I just didn't want to clutter up the tables because I know some of you have already completed your documents. So here are the steps to advanced care planning. Say it out loud, so communicate about it, write it down, and then share it around. So the very last step is making copies. So you keep the original once you've completed it in your files somewhere where it's accessible. And then you give one copy to your healthcare proxy, and you give one to your medical provider to put in your medical chart. And you can make copies for anyone else that you want to share this with, your family members or whatever. So are there any questions? Yes.
When you just started, you mentioned 4 things, and the last one was, do you want to die in your home? What were the first 2? When you first started your presentation. The last one was staying in your home, dying in your home.
Let's see. I had several questions that I listed here.
There were about 4.
If you had to choose between living longer or having a higher quality of life, which would you choose?
Okay.
Is that, do you think
That's one.
Okay. Do you want me to read them all?
Yes, please.
Okay, what considerations do you make when deciding about medical care?
Right.
What fears do you have about getting sick or?
Right.
Okay. Anyone else? Jocelyn?
I have an example of sharing it around. Our son, who's a millennial, is our alternate power of attorney for healthcare. And I took it over to him at a visit, and he promptly put it on the bottom of his pile. And I said, well, I thought we were going to talk about it. And he said, well, you're not here all that long. Let's just visit and have a good time. And so I checked in with him later, and I said, so maybe we could talk about it now. And he said, oh, don't worry, it's in the safe, all locked up, it's all taken care of.
Did that accomplish what you were hoping for?
No.
Okay. Okay. Sorry. Yeah.
So if you're between 2 states, your healthcare proxy, is it advisable to have one in both states?
Yes.
Your
For
healthcare,
medical care in your state?
as far as I know, your healthcare agent can be anywhere. And it doesn't matter, but there's laws that are specific to each state that the advanced directive, follows. So the main thing is communicating it, sharing the document with your healthcare proxy and completing the document that is approved by your state.
That's really careful.
Okay,
Okay, time for one more.
Jim.
And Karen, if you completed this and had it signed and it was all done properly in this state, and then, for instance, you became ill, seriously ill, and you were on vacation or in another state, would your wishes be altered, would your wishes be followed in that case, in that other state?
You know, so if you can speak for yourself, you don't need the document. Right,
I'm
but if
thinking-
if something happens to you in another state and you can't speak, then it's important that you have the document with you, on you, so that, or a card in your wallet that says, this is my healthcare representative. And that these documents do have that, a form for that, so you can actually, I recommend that actually, because otherwise, how are they gonna know?
I might just add something, I mean, even in this state, if you were in a hospital that doesn't believe in taking people off ventilators,
Right,
they are not required to do so, even if your healthcare proxy said that my person would not want this. What your proxy can do is, say, I want my person transferred to a hospital where their wishes will be followed.
uh-huh,
But that's not an easy thing. It's not, it's,
yeah.
can be a very difficult, process.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, if you're in emergency settings, you have, an emergency event and the paramedics come on and they actually start interventions like intubation and stuff like that. If you don't have your pulse or a DNR or anything on you, it doesn't matter. They're gonna do whatever they can to save you. And then you'll have to deal with that later.
Yeah.
I have a question about the proxy itself, in that, a lot of times we sign these things and then they sit there for years, and figures everything's quite fine, but as you get older, I'm wondering if you shouldn't have like the two proxies, like if this person is available, great, use them, but if not, then
Yes,
so and so.
so the document does allow for that.
Okay.
It has a second choice and then a third choice option for you.
The other question I had is, so on the final page, it talks about you have two options. You can have two witnesses, which I'm assuming it's the same for this as it is for a will. They have to be uninterested and there's no,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
That's right.
Or a notary. Are you a notary?
No, I'm not.
Okay, so you'd have to go to a bank or someplace like that?
A bank
It's hard to
or,
find here in the valley.
there's one at the
co-op has.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the co-op.
I'm not sure.
Department of Licensing.
Department of Licensing, that's right, yeah. They will charge you though. The bank
School
doesn't charge
district
if you're a bank member.
Insurance offices.
Oh, yeah, Jocelyn is a notary.
I'm a notary and I can be there on the 16th.
Okay, that's great. That'd be awesome. Thank you for offering that. Any other questions? Okay, I'd like to introduce Sheila Brandenburg, who is my teammate on the palliative care team, and she's the clinical lead of the palliative care team. She's gonna talk about the pulse form.
So actually you're gonna get tired of me because I'm doing 3 topics in a row, so. I'll try to move through this kind of quickly so that we make sure that we have enough time for questions. Thank you, Karen, for that topic and walking us through that. The POLST form, which is POLST, is the next document. After you do an advanced care planning, the POLST form is another document that you can complete. What POLST stands for, it's a physician's order for life-sustaining treatment. So you can see how it follows the ACP. So if you're in a position, for instance, you have a very serious illness and potentially you could have something catastrophic happen, and you're thinking about what of those advanced medical decisions that you would want made, you can complete a POLST form. And just so you see what they look like, they're this, for the state of Washington, they're bright green. And if you go into people's homes, sometimes you'll actually see them posted on a refrigerator or side of the cupboard or somewhere, that the reason that they do that, the state of Washington has taught the emergency services to look for the document. But we don't want them spending time going looking through a file, right? Because they're there to do emergency care. So they are bright green. And I'll talk a little bit more about the actual form. But it's an additional document to think about your own decision making. And it's broken down into just a couple of parts. It's not super complicated to fill out. It's super complicated to make those decisions for yourself. And just like advanced care planning, what we encourage people to do is not have the decision making in a vacuum, but really talk with your loved ones, your agent, your power of attorney, your extended family, whoever it will be there and present to help you make these decisions. These decisions usually happen like there's a sudden cardiac event. Okay, you're down on the floor, your spouse or your partner is there. What do you want them to do in that moment? Okay, that's when this green form comes in play. Okay. In the state of Washington, the POLST form is a binding contract. It is what your wishes are. It's signed by a physician, so it's a physician's order. Now, I would be remiss to tell you that everywhere you go, the doctors or the hospital or whatever will follow that POLST form. As Betsy said, there are organizations that don't necessarily have the same belief system. So it may require a transfer to somewhere else, but you want your family and now people that are listed to be able to confidently express your wishes in the situation that you are in the moment, okay? So can you rescind the POLST form? So you've signed the POLST form, you've been through a really bad medical crisis, maybe during the COVID episode, where people were worried about what would happen to them. They filled out POLST, they get through COVID, they're doing fine. Now they maybe want to change their mind. You just simply tear the thing up. You can fill it out again at a later time. You can tell your loved ones you don't want them to follow this. You can file it away somewhere where no one sees it. So you can rescind it. If you are in the house and something happens and the emergency people come and you are the power of attorney or the decision maker, you can rescind this, okay? You have that power, okay? So the takeaway there is it's really important to have this conversation with those people, okay, so that they know what you want. All right. So oftentimes when you go, and this is happening more and more, we're seeing physicians when people go like to their Medicare wellness visit, they're encouraging people to do their advanced care plans. And they're now also encouraging certain patients to consider a POLST form. Okay, so you may begin to hear more and more about these forms. And so just shifting away from the document for a second, a person may state that they do not wish to live with potential results of full medical service, like they don't want to live on a respirator or they don't want to be in a comatose state forever. Or they want to remain in their home and have a natural death and they don't want to be transported to the hospital. And what I remind people is these are all personal choices that we can make for ourselves, or we can make for the loved ones that we're named as their benefactor, okay? So they're not easy decisions because we can think about a million different ways something can happen, okay? But again, it's the conversation, You know, it's just knowing what your loved one would want for themselves, okay? This form does have to be signed by a medical provider. It's not two witnesses. It has to be signed by your medical provider. As a nurse, I often help people fill out the form, but then we take it to a provider to have it signed. It is scanned into your medical record, and then we encourage you to have copies at home, okay? This form, the PULSE form, is now available in all 50 states. In different iterations of it. They are not exactly the same. But if you travel to Arizona for the winter and you have a green PULSE and theirs is yellow, they will still honor your PULSE form. Okay? It is now being honored across the nation. There's my dad moved from Oregon up here for care, and he came with a bright pink one, and I'm like, wow, that's kind of a girly color. And he's like, they didn't give me a choice, I wanted purple. But they do identify in different colors, different wording. Each state has their own requirements, so you're gonna see different forms. If you're traveling in an RV somewhere for a long vacation, make a copy of it, make it green, stick it in your glove compartment. You can fold it up, put it in your wallet. It doesn't have to be on this heavy paper.
Can you take a picture of it?
You can take a picture. That is now, some places, they're not saying that it's completely legal, but it's kind of like having your information on your phone. They're gonna look at it, and it's going to inform them about what you would want, okay? That great question. All right, let's see, some tidbits about the PULSE form. This is not for everyone. You don't get handed this on your 60th birthday, okay? It's only for people with chronic or serious illness or someone who is very sure about what they want. Yes? Okay. So it isn't necessarily for everyone, and it's not a required document. If you want all full care and you don't want to fill out a PULSE form, no one's going to force you to do that, okay? This is to empower you and your healthcare. A PULSE form complements an advanced care plan, okay? So if you say, I don't want to go to the hospital, I want to remain at home, a PULSE form is a really good tool. Because the first thing the ambulance crew is going to do when they get to the home is look for one of these, okay? And it's really important to consider your own personal values and your wishes and your lifestyle and your family and all of that in making these decisions. We know that they are tough. And there can be some really stressful moments in trying to come up with this conversation for yourself. So just a couple last things about them. A PULSE form completion can give you more control by specifying more clearly what you do and do not want, okay? Serious medical interventions that can be included in the PULSE creation, CPR, ventilatory support, so being on a respirator, ventilator, intensive care placement, cardiac interventions, surgery, long-term care support, and also tube feedings. So receiving tube via any other route other than putting a spoon in your mouth, okay? So you can think about a lot of different things. Only a medical doctor, and then there's a whole bunch of other classifications, nurse practitioners, osteopathic medicines providers, and physician's assistants. They're the only ones that can sign the document. Let's see, you can change the PULSE form, and I stress that because people feel like it's a document that lives forever. It doesn't. Tear it up. If you go to Family Health Centers for your care and you've created a document and you're through your first round of chemo treatment and you're doing really well and you felt like, okay, I've got to get this in place beforehand, you can call Family Health Centers and say, remove that pulse form from my chart, okay? So it can be taken away. And then just the last thing, tattoos of the pulse form, bracelets or handwritten documents, unsigned documents, or pocket cards are not valid in the state of Washington, okay? Yeah, a lot of people think, oh, I'll just put DNR right over my heart. No, tattoos don't work. And there is a plan that has went through the Washington State Legislature about creating a vault for pulse forms. So it would be a virtual vault, basically. It would list all the names of people who have created pulse. That did not pass in this most recent funding. So it's gonna go into the next year, but that is something that they're working on. And that's gonna happen nationally eventually. All right, questions? Yes.
Yeah, so what's the, so with DNR, with a DNR and a pulse form, what's the, is it DNR part of a pulse form or?
Yeah, a DNR is a do not resuscitate. So if I have a cardiac event right now and I land on the floor and I've told my family that I'm a DNR, they can do everything they want. They can call the ambulance, they can give me oxygen, they can start an IV, but I don't want to be resuscitated. That's not there. Okay. That's not my wishes at this moment, but so you get to choose, and it's important to tell your family those choices.
But as far as the two documents go, are they one and the same or two different things?
The DNR is also on the pulse, you can check mark it.
Yes, the DNR is on the pulse. So let me read what the questions are. So there's three choices. This is an ABC document. It's really easy. A, do you want CPR or do you not want CPR? Not a lot of shade of gray there, okay? Just yes or no. And then the next one is level of medical interventions. So now you get to choose a few other things. So you can have full treatment. That means I want hardcore full press. I want everything. Start the IVs, put in the Foleys, give me food, do everything. And yes, I talk with my hands, I apologize. Selective treatment means that I want some things, but I may not want other things. Now, this doesn't give you a list of every option. So what am I gonna do? I'm gonna talk to the people that I trust, and I'm gonna tell them what that is. Like, I'm really claustrophobic. The idea of being on a ventilator and not being able to breathe on my own scares me. That might be something, I want everything but that, okay? So that's what I would tell my family. And it gives you a lot of options, and I won't read them all, but what?
If you don't want CPR, you don't need the other stuff, right?
Correct. Yeah, if your heart has stopped, most likely it's not gonna restart on its own. Yes?
I had something to say that might answer your question, so I just dealt with this with my dad. Like we had filled out the advanced care directive, we talked about it in depth. They come there, I say it's a DNR, and they're like, where's your pulse form? I said, I don't have it. It didn't matter that I had everything else, I need that green form.
Yeah, it comes down to that hard decision, and the paramedics have to follow the law. So if you don't have a pulse form that says no, now the only, wow, no, okay.
If you don't have that green form, paramedics don't care if you're, if the person
If
is
they're the
there.
yeah, they'll do it anyway, absolutely. But this goes into things like fluids and cardiac monitoring and all kinds of other things.
But it's true, if you do the first one, you don't need to do the rest.
Right.
So you could have.
You could,
Collapse without needing CPR.
Right.
Just not be able to communicate.
Yeah. And so, so for instance, you're playing pickleball and you're working really hard and you have a cardiac event and you fall to the ground and somebody takes your pulse and thinks that your heart is not functioning. the paramedics come and they feel a very faint pulse. Okay, so they're gonna get out their little thing and check your rhythm and all of that. But what you're saying is, I don't really want CPR, so they go that next step. Okay,
I don't understand what when you say they go that next step, what do you mean, what next step?
well, they're gonna do the cardiac rhythm and see what's going on with the heart. Because the heart Mallory, could you help me?
Yeah, so if you have a cardiac event, the first thing that they're gonna do is they're gonna determine whether you have a pulse or not. If you don't have a pulse, they can do a couple of interventions. They'd start a line, they'd put the paddles on you, you can't really shock and no pulse, but they'll put paddles just in case they get a rhythm, and they'll start injecting you with stuff to jumpstart your heart. And usually they'll intubate you, and so that's where all the rest of that comes in, the airway, the circulation, all of that, because CPR is just one of many, many things that they need to do in order to sustain life. And so if you don't want to be intubated, that's going to complicate things. You know, there's a million different ways that a heart attack can go, and CPR is just one of those, and is often actually not used as much as people think. Heart attacks a lot of times don't end up in a stopped heart.
So Al and I have taken the CPR course.
Okay.
So what happens when it's a neighbor or a friend
Uh-huh.
and there's no green thing? Do we go ahead?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's kind of a personal decision. No one can say, hey, you have a CPR card in your wallet, you needed to do CPR.
Nobody's gonna sue us. that We didn't do it here.
Well, they have a whole law for that.
Yeah, because you're a bystander and they're not gonna, there is a law in place if you're trying to help someone. Yes, good Samaritan, good Samaritan law. Yeah, yeah. So yes, you can help your neighbor, and if there's no green form, there's no green form. And if I was the neighbor and my neighbor had the green form, I still would be really hesitant. I mean, that would scare me to say, okay, I'm just stand here and do nothing.
Yeah, people don't die necessarily from heart attacks.
Right. But
So you
usually,
don't get, what kind of a heart attack was this? I mean,
No, you have to
if it's
check.
bad,
Right.
okay, bye-bye, but people can be totally fine.
that's why you have to really think about what it is you're saying. Now, so the majority of my work in palliative care is with people who have end of life diseases. And they're making the choice based on their disease process, not the spontaneous small
Okay,
heart
okay,
attack.
That's
Yes.
that one, they're already in, instead of, I
Yes.
forgot.
Yeah, I think the pulse isn't just for a cardiac event.
Right. It could be for drowning, it could be for electrocution, it could be from a serious illness. So there are lots of different things, yes.
Yeah, and CPR isn't just for heart attacks. CPR is to pump the blood around your body while you're waiting for hopefully EMS to get there so that they get oxygen into your brain.
Yeah.
So it's not just to restart the heart.
So how does an AED compare to, for instance, manual resuscitation?
Easier.
It's easier to use, but do you have a choice? Can you say, well, I would want the AED, but I don't want them to break my ribs?
An AED isn't CPR, it's shocking.
Yeah.
So you put
It's
it on
electrical.
there.
But you always ask for one as you're going to do the CPR.
Ask
And
for
you-
one.
You yell, does anyone have an AED?
Right, because you're trying to ascertain, is their heart still intact or is this you're trying to ascertain kind of what's going on.
Also, it's a common misconception that you shock somebody when their heart isn't beating. You
Right.
actually need to have a certain type of rhythm in order to shock them. So all of those shows that we watch that say it has no pulse, the line is flat, and then they shock them, isn't really true. You need to have an actual pulse. And so the AED, you put it on and it measures your pulse, and it is the type of pulse that you can shock. Then you shock it, and it's supposed to shock your heart into a normal rhythm.
And you had to remove all the clothes.
Yes.
It's gotta be next to your flesh.
Yes.
So it's really hard to move that wrong.
Exactly. All right, so, okay,
Oh, I'm sorry.
that's okay.
I just wondered if we could talk for a minute about what your and Karen's work actually is.
I'm gonna go into that.
Okay.
Yes, that's why I have 3 topics.
Okay.
But I wanna make sure that we have time, so, okay. So the next topic is actually palliative care. So, I am I'm a palliative care certified registered nurse. And I work with a palliative care team of doctors, nurse practitioners, and everything that Karen encompasses, which is amazing amount of information. And palliative care is in the nation is a developing medical service of its own. It's a specialty medical service was created primarily for people with serious and chronic illness. So serious and chronic illnesses are things like cancer, COPD, chronic pulmonary disease, chronic heart failure, liver disease, kidney failure. So dementia now falls into that category as well as a bunch of other things that doesn't really matter what the illnesses are. If it's serious and it's chronic and you need support, that's what palliative care is for. Our focus is on providing relief from symptoms and stress of the illness that the person is undergoing. And we seek to see people beyond the disease. So what our real goal is to help people live the best quality of life that they can, irregardless of the disease that affects their body, okay? So it's kind of a fundamental shift. Our goal is that if the world was Sheila's world, people wouldn't have to go to the hospital to get their COPD treated. They would have symptoms, they'd call their palliative care nurse, the palliative care nurse would hook them up with the provider, we'd get them the medications, and they wouldn't have to spend a week in the hospital, okay? So we could save money, people would feel better, people would be treated in their own communities instead of the way that it is currently. So that's my dream, okay? So if anybody has a treasure chest. Palliative care is a specialized medical care. We really are trying to focus on quality of life. And that doesn't mean that quantity is not important. But when people are living in their homes and they're miserable and they're going back and forth to a hospital, they're miserable. Their life isn't the quality that they're looking for. So we want to improve the quality as much as we can. It's focused on, I already said that. Okay. So what does the palliative care team do? If you ever come and you ever see us come into a patient's home to do our initial intake, it looks like we're there for a regular visit, like we're just chit-chatting. And the reason is, the reason that our conversations are kind of like that is because what's most important to us is what's important to you, and to you, and to you. And so one of our first questions are, what makes a good day for you? Okay? If I'm to answer the question myself, a good day is my really good morning coffee, ideally sitting on the back porch, watching the dog play, watching the river go by. I know who I'm with, I know what we're talking about, and I know who my family is. That's a good day for me, okay? Now, if I have renal failure and I'm going to dialysis 3 times a week and I have to travel 3 hours to get there and 3 hours back, and I have to spend 3 hours while I'm there, I'm hungry, I'm tired, I don't feel good, my quality of life is not exactly matching up with what my hopes are. So palliative care is designed to kind of help us figure out where those answers lie. We are not magic. We can't make renal failure go away. But we can have really good discussions about what is important and how can we make your life as good as possible, okay? Palliative care supports decision-making. It's not my decision-making. It's not your provider's decision-making. It's yours. What do you want for your life? What do you want for this unfortunate, maybe tragic situation that you're in, where your body is filled with cancer? It's not what we want, but we know that that's the reality. What can we do to make it better? Patient and family support. Palliative care is one of the only, not the only, but We focus on the family as much as we focus on the patient, because the patient isn't the only one suffering. The caregivers have a heavy burden, and they're watching this happen to their loved one. And so, yes, Melba? So we want to help the families as well. We want to make sure that they're supported and that they have resources. We focus on communication. So we talk like regular people. We don't talk about, the high level medical jargon, although my doctors definitely talk more that way than I do. And we want to match the care with what the patient wants. We do a lot of management of the patient and their situation with the clinic, their providers. We look at emotional situations, their mental health. We look at their diet. How do they get around their house? What's their pain? I mean, we look at all of those things. All of those things are important about how they live their life and what decisions they're making. And then we coordinate with all the people that are involved. One of the things that is the biggest blessing in this community and in my life personally is this network that we have here, because all kinds of medical and non-medical groups are part of how we are able to do palliative care. So MedTow at Home and Lookout and Room One and the HRSA grants. I was like, what do I call that? There are several grants in the community that are providing new resources. Family Health Centers, Confluence, Mid-Valley, Three Rivers Hospital. We're all a part of a network trying to improve quality of life for people. And so that's really important to me. Many studies demonstrate the power that palliative care can have in improving the quality of life, people's knowledge of their specific disease. If you've ever gone in, and a doctor will tell you, oh, that breathing problem that you have, that's COPD. So here's a little pamphlet on that. Not really the most helpful information in the long run. You need to know a little bit more. And so oftentimes we come in and we say, so what's making your breathing better? What's making it worse? Let's look at your environment. Let's try to capitalize on all the different tools that we have to help you with that. We want to lower symptom burden. So symptom burden is that shortness of breath, the confusion with dementia, pain with cancer, any symptom that you're having. We like to work on those things as well. And help patients and families make informed decision making.
You got about 5 minutes.
Okay, great. I have a story, but I won't tell you. Actually, I'll kind of briefly tell you. So this is an example of a palliative care patient. A 50-year-old patient with a neurological disorder that is progressive. So this is a terminal condition. The patient themselves called for a palliative care consult. They had heard about it and they wanted it. So we met with the patient and the family. At that point, the patient was still pretty independent, but declining. So I let the patient sort of run the show. Like, why did you invite me here? What are we doing? They wanted to know things about their diagnosis. What's the progression of this disease? How long do I have? Is there any treatments? Could I go somewhere else? Would somebody else treat me differently? What else could I do? What does this look like? That was the biggest question. What does this look like? So we talked through all those things, and I also gave a lot of tips about the future. Like, I need you to think about a wheelchair right now. Like, we need to get an order for an electric wheelchair. That's something you're gonna need. Let's think about a bed. Let's think about the housing, because all of these things are gonna matter down the line. The patient themselves asked that palliative care stay involved from that day on. So we helped to provide those things. Advanced care plans, pulse forms, went to doctor's appointments, hooked them up with Bellevue Healthcare to get equipment ordered. We hooked him up with a couple of other organizations to help him out. There was a national organization, hooked him up with that so he could get more answers. The person's primary goal, because we always ask, what's the goal? What are you hoping for? I want to go to a Seahawks game with all my high school, college buddies. Unfortunately, it wasn't football season. And so by the time that the Seahawks rolled around, that person was not able to attend. But what we did is we invited all of those friends to come, and we got a big screen TV so that they could screen it, and they had beer and all the things that was there. And they had a lot of music, they had pictures and everything. That was the patient's wish. What the patient said later, not about that situation, that he was thrilled that that happened. But when I asked him about the review, kind of like, how did this all go for you? The one thing he said is that if you hadn't come when you did, I would have never understood all of the things that I might go through and the steps that I needed to take to live the best life I could. And that I needed to get my ducks, word was changed, ducks in a row, in order to live that year to its fullest. And all those other services were all a part of the journey with this patient. All right, that's my palliative care part. Yes.
Who pays for it?
Huh?
How do you guys get paid? How does this get paid for?
So palliative care can bill through a patient's insurance, if it's a medical provider. You get me thrown in as a freebie, but
I missed something, I'm sorry.
you get the nursing staff as a freebie because they don't pay for nursing yet. But there was a law that was put in front of the House and the legislature this year that was passed about giving a palliative care benefit in the state of Washington. And it will go to they're gonna be doing this big trial thing. I don't know exactly all the ins and outs of it. But I believe that there is a benefit coming for the residents of the state of Washington.
If you want palliative care, how do you go about getting it?
Yeah, so all of our providers at all of our clinics and even our hospitals now know about palliative care, and our numbers are increasing. The best way to get it is to talk to your provider. And they are now thinking about it. So if you have a disease or an illness of a certain type, they can think about it on their own. They don't always think of it though, because we're so used to treating people at the end of their life, not in the middle of an illness. But we've had patients on our palliative service since inception, so 3 years. We still have a few patients, 3 years. So we're not just end of life, but we're happy to do that as well. Other questions? Okay.
Just a couple minutes.
All right. Now I'm going to switch topics really quick. Okay. I told you. All right. So the last topic that I was given, put that down, is hospice. So what is hospice? Hospice is a Medicare, Medicaid benefit for people with 6 months or less, determined by a provider. Okay, so you go to the oncology and you fight and you fight and you fight, and the doctor says, you know, we're sorry, the meds aren't working and nothing's gonna help, and my best guess is 6 months or less. Okay, there is no stop date on people. We don't expire according to the doctor.
In 6 months.
In 6 months. So I was a hospice nurse for 10 years in Okanagan County. And so we would sometimes get patients on hospice and 2 years later we still have them. And the caveat there is you have to continue to demonstrate decline. So decline can be things like weight loss, chronic bowel issues like diarrhea, constipation, mobility, like it's declining. You can get up for a few minutes, but you can only walk from here to here. So they have certain things that they look at. And Medicare is, as you know, a government, national program, and they're very rigid with the rules. But patients can go on hospice and there is no expiration date. They don't kick them off just because they're still alive after 6 months. Yes. How long was Jimmy on?
He's been on before.
Right. And that's another thing that can happen. You can go on hospice and you can go off hospice and you can go back on hospice and back off hospice. So again, there isn't an expiration date. So the hospice in its purest definition is an interdisciplinary team of professionals trained to address physical, psychosocial, spiritual needs of the patient. The team also supports the family members and other unpaid caregivers, provided primarily where a patient lives. Now we all think of home, but home can also be a nursing home or community living or with a family or in many different ways. They're now actually working to develop spaces so the homeless who are dying of terminal illnesses have places to go as well. It allows the patient to be around those things that are important to them, their memories, their families, those kinds of things. There are, in big cities, hospice homes where you go, you move in, and that's your final home. We don't have anything like that in Okanogan County. Hospice covers periodic visits by nursing staff. There's a limited amount of physical and occupational support that can happen while a patient is in hospice. For instance, if they're falling because the way they get up out of the bed, physical therapists can come and teach the family a different way to help them. And there also can be, caregivers. Hospice usually covers like bathing assistance people. So like once or twice a week, someone would come and actually do bathing. Hospice is required to be 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They have to have an online response to patients. And it's the only medical care where bereavement care is included in the benefit. So a hospice organization is required to have grief counseling while people are going through the process and at least a year of bereavement support for patients, family, well, not the patient, but families and caregivers. Okay. So they're required to have that. Let's see. Medicare is the biggest Medicare is the biggest provider of hospice support. So if you have a Medicare benefit and you need hospice, you're almost always allowed to go onto hospice. But it's also covered by private insurances at varying levels depending on the insurance, and also in most states, including Washington. So in Washington, if you're on Medicaid, you can be covered under hospice. What hospice is not? Okay, so this is where it gets a little tricky. Hospice pays for all of your meds, all of your stuff while you're on hospice. So if you need a hospital bed, they have to pay for it. If you need a wheelchair, they have to pay for it. If you need meds that are related to your comfort or your actual disease, they will pay for it. But if you have an oncology diagnosis, but you need a puffer, they're not going to pay for your puffer, your albuterol, if you're not dying of COPD. So there's a few little tricks in there. The hardest thing for me was, like, I had patients when I was working palliative care in oncology, the way that they were sustaining life was to get infusions like 2 or 3 times a week because they couldn't hold their body fluids because of their kind of cancer. That's not covered under hospice. And so it's hard to tell somebody that, because if they stop the infusion, they will not live. So there are some sticky details. Yes, am I done?
Yeah, running out of time.
Okay. All right. So any quick questions? Plus I'll be here afterwards. Yeah, hospice is not the greatest topic to stop on, I'm sorry. The look went, All right.
And we can take a quick 5-minute break if folks are needing to use
Yes.
the bathroom and move around a bit, and then we'll come back.
So no, I'm not gonna talk anymore. I just wanted to introduce our next speaker. Mallory Taylor is with the
Methow Valley Community-Based Long-Term Care Network. It's a mouthful. So it's called the network.
So you're up.
Yeah, moving my water bottle. I have allergies, so my throat gets a little scratchy. So I work in a couple of different realms in the network, and I guess I'll tell you what the network is. The Methow Valley Community-Based Long-Term Care Network is a network that we are currently developing. We're in the first year of developing this, and it encompasses Methow at Home, Room One, Lookout Coalition, Palliative Care, and a slew of other organizations. And our goal is to really build a sustainable healthcare network for aging population in the community. And without getting into the nitty gritty of it, but we just really want to have like a more holistic one-stop shop that we have somebody who's able to reach out and organize your care throughout the community without you guys having to actually individually go and call all of the different agencies, because that can be really hard when you're sick or you have a loved one who's sick. So we're trying to build a network that can kind of help provide a more holistic care in our community. But my role today specifically is to talk about in-home care, and I am a caregiver liaison. So I work with private caregivers and connect them with people who are searching for care in their home. I'm not going to go into Jamie's Place, and I'm not going to even go into Medicaid. Andy will talk about that later. But specifically private caregivers who are working on their own. They're not with an agency. Generally, these individuals get their license in either HCA, which is a home care aide or healthcare aide, or a certified nursing assistant. So they get that certification, they're licensed with Washington State, and they have the ability to come into your home and provide care. You can hire a caregiver who doesn't have that license, and I'll go into a little bit about that later, but if you have real healthcare issues, if you are really needing personal care, the kind of care that takes somebody who helps you go to the bathroom, who helps you with dressing and stuff like that, mobility issues, if you have a lot of medications, that's somebody who really should be certified and actually go through the training to provide in-home care. And then you can also hire a caregiver who doesn't have that certification, and a lot of people who do that are usually people who need what we call IADLs, which is independent activities of daily living. So that's walking to the post office, going on a walk, driving to the grocery store, gardening, all of that stuff. Those are the type of tasks that you don't necessarily need a caregiver who has a license or has, actual training for how to take care of somebody. Sorry, I didn't bring a paper like those guys did, so I'm going off the top of my head. And it's not quite as cut and dry as, palliative care and all of that. It's really a situational basis when we're talking about in-home care between you and the caregiver. What you're really doing is you're entering a private contract with somebody. And so this person is oftentimes either a small business owner running a sole proprietor. They hopefully have a business license, and they're really, they're coming in as a private contractor into your home, and then you are paying them privately, not through an agency or anything like that. And so one of the things that I think is really helpful to know when you're looking at caregivers is understanding that those individuals have a lot that they have to actually expend when they're coming into your home and they're not with an agency. those guys don't have LMI, they don't have paid time off, they don't have that kind of security. Oftentimes they have to actually get caregiver insurance, so it protects them in case an event happens. They're paying for their gloves sometimes. They're, having to squirrel some stuff away in case they get sick, or in case, something happens and you no longer need a caregiver. And so because of that, the price for private in-home care is a little bit higher than people actually think. A lot of individuals who are needing care are thinking that it starts around, the $20 an hour mark. And right now in Washington, the average hourly rate for an in-home caregiver is $29. And in the Met-Howell Valley, in the Met-Howell Valley, it goes up. So for individuals who are licensed as an HCA or a CNA, it kind of starts at $30 an hour, and it goes up from there depending on experience.
Are there many people here that do it?
So there are a few people. We're working, one of my jobs is actually to build up that caregiver workforce. So we're training more caregivers, and we're really trying to create a sustainable caregiver workforce. Another one of the issues is that these individuals set their own hours, so if you're looking for 24-hour care, it's going to be really hard because a lot of these guys have families, they have kids to take care of. They don't necessarily want to be at your house every weekend, every holiday, overnight. So just if you're thinking about that, kind of get the reality that it would be really, really hard to actually get full 24-hour care. And if we're talking about $30 an hour, that's around, for a 40-hour work week, that's around $5,000 a month. If you're looking for 24-hour care, that's around $20,000. So when it gets really, really big. And I won't go into Jamie's place, but when you start looking at 24-hour care, that's usually when people start looking at facilities, because it's a little bit more financially possible. What are the other things? So for clients who are looking for a private in-home caregiver, in the Met-Howell Valley, it has always been kind of, you trust this person, you maybe ask around about this person and make sure through the valley, word of mouth that these guys are trustworthy. But as we start getting more caregivers in the community and maybe they haven't been around as long, I think, it would really behoove people to start actually checking with the state that they have a license. If you definitely want somebody who has a license, there is a credential search on the Department of Health, and you can actually search for somebody's credential. You should ask them for their, picture of their card. Having their CPR and first aid certification is also really important. Ensuring that they have, insurance of some sort is also a really good idea, and checking their references and getting a background check, because you are inviting these individuals into your home. And a lot of times you could be vulnerable, or whoever is being taken care of is vulnerable. And so you really want to make sure that you have somebody who's responsible and who isn't going to take advantage. Those cases are really rare in the scope of how many people are in-home caregivers, but it does happen. And so just taking those steps to really protect yourself is one of the best ways that you can make sure nothing crazy happens. So yeah, I guess those are the basic things that I think everybody should know. I'm going to leave my card here and I'll have questions, but just because it's such a situational basis, it's really one of those things of somebody coming to me and talking to me about their individual needs, and I can help them find somebody who's really going to provide for the care that they need, which could be, something as casual as just needing somebody to come do meal prep, or somebody who actually does need to have, those ADLs, such as, walking and bathing and getting dressed. And one of the things that our network is actually doing is we recognize that there's a really big gap right now between in-home caregivers, the certified HCAs, the CNAs, and those people who actually just need somebody to come in and maybe sit with them and be a companion or make their meals. And so we're actually working as a network to try and figure out how to bridge that gap, because when you're looking at long-term care, a lot of people have you know, if you have long-term care insurance, you might have $250,000 to use from. And having a full-time caregiver, if you don't necessarily need that care, if you are looking for companionship, you don't want to deplete that resource for when you might need it later on. And so we're looking at ways to offer that. I can't give you any answers right now, but that is one of the things that we are working on. And one of the things, if you're thinking about care, and you think, you know, I just need somebody here, I need help, but you're still doing, you know, you're still getting up, you're still able to cook your meals, you're still able to toilet yourself. You might need a caregiver, but you also might need something else, you know, not somebody who is going to come in and who is licensed. You might need somebody, a volunteer or some other organization that we have yet to tap into. And so those are just things to think about when you start realizing that you need a little bit more support at home. Is that we are trying as a network to really figure out ways that we can help people without depleting that financial resource that you guys are going to need to depend on for the rest of the time. Yeah.
How busy are you? How many people do you have coming to you looking for licensed care at this point in the valley?
Licensed care, you know, when people desperately need caregivers, the license starts to kind of they're not quite as worried, which is why we're trying to license more and more people. But I have people who are looking for caregivers from the span of they just want somebody to come in and do light housekeeping all the way to they need 24-hour care. And I would say on average in that full spectrum, it's about once a week. And that doesn't mean that they need 40 hours of care. They might need somebody to come in for 3 days, 2 hours in each of those days. So 6 to 8 hours a week. Which again is also really hard if you're looking at somebody who is trying to make caregiving their job, because if you have, you know, one person who wants you here on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday between the hours of 8, a lot of people want them to come help them get up and go to bed. And so when everybody wants that, you know, it really depletes that resource for the caregiver. And then what are they going to do in between all of that time? And so that's why it gets really funky when you're starting to look at caregivers, because they need a full-time job. They have to pay their bills. They have to do all of this. So I am slightly busy.
How successful have you been at hooking people up, those who have asked?
Yeah. Again, so I'm not their employer. I don't tell them what to do. I try to find somebody for everybody that really needs a caregiver. I try to be really realistic with people also, that we are really short staffed for caregivers right now. We have some, we just actually trained 6 new caregivers who may be entering the workforce. I have a couple of them are, and they're definitely the ones that are asking for the most time. So I try to get them a number. The amount of successes after that is really, you know, it kind of tapers off because sometimes the caregiver doesn't work out or relate. The other thing is, you know, personality things. If this person's coming into your home, you want to really get along with them and feel like this is, you know, somebody who you can actually depend on. And sometimes that just doesn't work out. And so we're really trying to get a wider range. I think when I started a year ago, when they gave me the list of caregivers, it was 10. And when I called all of them, there was maybe like 3 who were working. So from there, I think we've got about 10 people who will at some times, but that doesn't mean that that's their full-time job. Some people just do it on, you know, a couple of hours a week as a second income stream. Or a lot of times people do it for friends and family members that they know and they're not quite in the community.
Do you work through Met-Hal Home?
I do not.
Okay.
I work for the Met-Hal Valley Community-Based Long-Term Care Network, which is funded by HRSA, which is a government-funded grant. So that's, and I casually moonlight at Jamie's place whenever they need technical assistance.
I know I tried working with one of the caregivers and it didn't work out. My husband has insurance for it. And the insurance company wants her to go online, submit her time, and then it goes through me. I'm her employee. Okay, then I carry L&I being her employee. And it bumped her up. She has children. And they said, well, you're going to be in a different bracket. Your kids for, insurance, health insurance. And she says, I can't afford you,
Yep, yeah,
you know, and so, oh, okay.
yeah, and that is the other thing is we have, so I was a private caregiver for a while and I did everything by the book and I got my business license and all of that. And tried to be as responsible, but it ended up being so hard. And so I do know that some caregivers, they start doing that, they don't want to do that. And so they work under the table for cash or something like that. And so these are all different circumstances that you might have to deal with. Somebody who's asking to get paid in cash, somebody who doesn't want a 1099. They don't want all of those taxes. They just want their cash and they want to go home. And so those are the type of situations that it's, you know, you can always come talk to me, but it's really important for you guys to protect yourselves, and because the caregivers are also looking out for themselves. And so before you get to that point where all of a sudden, you know, you have an event and you go into the hospital and you realize you're going to have a caregiver when you come home, it might just, you know, it might be one of those things to think about before, or if you have a family member who's going to need care, is to do a little bit of research to understand kind of the intricacies that happen when you hire a private caregiver. And the insurance is really hard, and I don't know hardly any of the caregivers that I work with that actually go through care and state funded either. They don't want to go through the state. They want private pay because they can set their rate and their hours and everything.
And it is so difficult to implement. I've been taking 3-4 months to at least get all of the paperwork done.
Yeah.
And everything is, I would recommend never to take out health, you know, insurance.
A couple months
Life
ago,
insurance,
we had a long-term care insurance speaker come and talk about long-term care insurance, and that was actually really interesting because they have an option where there's two options, and one of the options is for the first month you pay and then you give them receipts, and based off of that they give you the cash, and then you can privately pay the caregiver versus that caregiver having to submit time to the insurance company. So it's just so, you know, our entire system is completely screwbally, but the best thing you can do is research for yourself and figure out, especially if you have something in mind. If you know, like, I'm starting to get to the point where I need somebody to come in maybe 8 hours a week. Start talking to people, talk to the resources, talk to me, talk to your insurance. You can always go and kind of scenario with them and just say, hey, if this happens, what does this look like? Call Aging and Adult Care. If you are qualified for Medicaid, start talking with them. We're always here to talk. We might not have all the answers and things change, but the more educated you are, the less surprises you're going to have when you realize you're going to have to pay somebody a lot of money to come into your home and just help you, and that's unfortunate. Any other questions?
Dina, is there any coordination for people who need to get to medical appointments? Because I know for a while I used to do that. I did it for friends of mine, and I would just do it for them because I was just doing it as a favor. But then I started getting people calling me because, and I did do it for others, people that I didn't know, just because they were caught and somebody had agreed to do it and then they couldn't do it, and this doctor appointment was set and it was one that they took them months to get, and you know, I felt really sorry for them, but I can't do it anymore. I mean, driving to Wenatchee and back in a day is like.
Don't the angels do it?
But I didn't know if there's anything in the valley where it's organized, where somebody could call and maybe schedule something so they know they're gonna have someone to take them.
Yeah, so Met How at Home is, we are a small nonprofit. We have trained and vetted volunteers. That is one of the services that we do offer. We do have, we have memberships.
The angels just come, I don't think that they can take you anywhere.
Guardian, are you talking about guardian angels?
No, they
Well,
don't do that.
yeah, sometime, yeah, your guardian angel is a separate, that is a program of Met How at Home as well. But yeah, we do ask for a week out, you know, in order to set up rides like that. And sometimes it is tricky to find people to go all the way to Wenatchee these days, but we do our best. Wenatchee, Omak, Brewster.
Yeah. So that's one of the, you know, our network, one of the things that we're working on identifying is all of these gaps, and that is GAP. And because we don't have taxis and everything like that, it's really important, the caregivers, when I'm talking to caregivers, I really stress that when you start putting people in your car or you start taking people's car, your liability risk goes way, way up. And so I educate them on that a little bit and hope to educate the larger community that it's really hard to just ask somebody to, drive you in their personal car or vice versa, because anything can happen through no fault of anybody else. But so that's something that I as a caregiver didn't always feel comfortable with, and it's just a situational basis. But one of the things that we are looking at, if it's Mallory's world, we'll take it from Sheila, is that we would have some type of service, like the motion, I don't know, it used to be called Gabby Tabby, but whatever it's called now, having some kind of relationship with them where maybe our community has a pool of funds for individuals who can't get to their appointment, and we can help pay for part of that or all of that expense. So those are the type of ideas that we are really looking at. And again, we're in our infancy, we're just a year in, so it's not gonna happen tomorrow by any means, but those are the type of things that our network is really looking on solving.
I've been able to get to Omak and Okanagan for eye injections with Prango.
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
Yeah, which is brand new, which is super cool.
What is it?
Cost
The bus.
Trango?
Yeah.
And doesn't the senior bus go to Wenatchee and Omak?
Once a month.
But not
Yeah. But you can coordinate your appointments. And if you qualify for Medicaid, there is something called People for People. And those guys are amazing. And they go all over. And I think that there is something, Angels, that will fly you. But it's a flight service. So Flight Angels or something like that. Okay. Yes.
We're going to
transition, yes. Thank you.
Oh, I'm supposed to introduce her. Her name is Andy. I can't pronounce her last name. She's with Aging and Adult Resources.
Hi, my name is Andy DeRozier. I'm with Aging and Adult Care over in Omak. And I'm just going to pass out a few things here. I think we have more than 30 people in.
There's
Okay, we'll see how many we can pass around here. Start it there. So I came by this evening because I wanted to talk about different supports in the home that can be funded. So Aging and Adult Care, we receive our funding from the government and from the state. And we are one of 13 what are called Area Agency on Aging throughout the whole state. And these AAAs, they are tasked with monitoring, managing, in-home care programs and supports for people with disabilities 18 and older, and then also aging adults 55 plus. So that's the primary people that we work with on a day-to-day basis. So the brochures that I handed out, the top one is called a Getting In-Home Care Guide. And so I'm just going to kind of use that as a reference to run through the different support options. Most of our programs, they do have income and resource limits. And so I think that might be a topic of interest, just kind of knowing, in general, can this support be an option for me? As I get older and maybe myself or, your family members need support. And so I am so glad that Mallory went before me because that was a wealth of information on caregiving for, your community. I forgot to also say that I really appreciate just like how your community is just so connected and just so like full of life, and I don't know, I love Met Health Valley. It's amazing. I'm up in Snaskit. Snaskit's great too, but you guys have a great community. So the most of our programs we have to use in-home care agencies. So our county has 3 in-home care agencies, and that is the first page in that pamphlet. Always Caring Home Care, Beneficial In-Home Care, and In-Home Care of Central Washington. There is a caregiver shortage in this area. We do serve a lot of people in the area, but it can be very difficult, unfortunately. So I have to be upfront about that. Sometimes what people do is if you find that you're eligible for an in-home care program, and you have friends, acquaintances, people that you know that are maybe open to working with a home care agency, they can work with you and be your paid caregiver. And the state, or the government can pay them under that program. So some of the programs also allow friends and family members to be paid caregivers. And that is Consumer Directed Care of Washington. They are an organization that provide training and all the certifications to become a paid caregiver with the state. And so unfortunately, spouses, if you're married, a spouse can't be a paid caregiver, but family members can be. So that's also another support option for people, if you find that you qualify for an in-home care program. So we do have a basic chore program called Aging Network Chore, and that's for people 60 and over. I did include a pamphlet on that, and it's very minimal, 6 to 8 hours a month of in-home care for chore services. And we also have respite programs. So we have a big focus on supporting unpaid family caregivers. So that's through a couple different programs. One is called the Family Caregiver Support Program. And that's a program we have where resources don't matter because we want to focus on the family caregiver. Keeping in mind that can be a neighbor, it can be a friend, a distant relative, anyone that's providing care for someone they care about is considered an unpaid family caregiver. So some of the supports we have are not only the in-home care supports through that program, like the respite care through the home care agency, but we also have like caregiver counseling, care supplies, incontinence supplies, assistive devices, fall alert devices, and one-on-one support from a family caregiver specialist that's there to help you navigate through this. And then going into the state programs, that will be if everyone would grab in their pamphlet if you have one, it is going to be a comparison right behind the brochure. It's a comparison of our MAC and SOSOA program with our long-term care Medicaid programs. So this is a breakdown of probably some of our most popular programs, of our current resources and income for both of those programs. Both of these programs work with home care agencies, and then coming this end of the spring, both programs will also be able to work with individual providers or those caregivers friends and family that you can choose to be your caregiver. So these programs through the state, the program on the left-hand side, McIntosh SOA, these are in-home care programs that have the in-home care, things like home delivered meals, accommodations in the home. We can do ramps, we can do, in special circumstances, walk-in showers. Lots of different supports are provided under that program. It does have some income and resource guidelines. The income guideline, it only takes into consideration the person needing the care. So if you're married, it doesn't consider the couple's income, just the person needing the care. And then there's a specified resource limit on there as well. So it has a little higher resource and income limit is the other side. So that is a good option, if you do have some savings set aside, that, it's important to you. I have people that, have small properties that are, on this program. The resource limit,
39?
139,000.
Well, 139,700 for married.
Yep, and then, sorry, I should have kept one for myself, I don't think I did. Did I? Thank you very much. Okay, so, 71,394 for a single person. That excludes your primary home and your primary vehicle. For a married couple, 139,695. That excludes your primary home and primary vehicle. So you can have a little savings there, and still qualify for this in-home care program. These programs are going to be for people that do need a little more support than just some housekeeping. They're going to need help with activities of daily living. So maybe support with managing their medications, getting around physically, maybe support with bathing, supervision if they have, a memory impairment. So just keeping that in mind. This program does not have a state recovery. Does everyone know what a state recovery is?
No.
Okay, so it means that there are some in-home care programs that the state will go ahead and provide all the care you need in the home, not 24/7 care, but a good amount of care in the home depending on your needs. But when you pass, or if you're married, when you and your couple pass, you and your spouse pass, the state can place a lien on your home, and they recover the funds dollar for dollar that were provided to you and or your spouse while you were living. So this McIntosh SOA programs do not have the estate recovery. The other side, the long-term care Medicaid, that is a need-based program that provides the most support in the home, but unfortunately it does have the estate recovery attached to it. So it's basically a way of you being able to use your home to stay in your home, which is, if that's what you want, you're using your home as an asset to just pay for your care and live happily, independently in your home. And when you and your spouse are no longer living in it and it's not needed anymore, then that transaction does take place with the estate recovery. So that, I know that, I think there was some questions maybe on like a spend down process. So what that means is, you'll notice on the right-hand side for the Medicaid home care program, there are some stricter resource limits. So a single person can only have about $2,000 in resources. So resources are going to be things like checking, savings, if you have a bunch of cash in a safe somewhere,
Social Security.
no, not Social Security, yep, that would be your income. It would include stocks, bonds, IRAs, anything that can be liquidated and turned into cash to use, excluding your home. The resource limit, if you go onto the Medicaid program and you're married, your spouse can keep up to $68,301. So you guys can still have some assets if you're married. So I just wanted to kind of give you a little breakdown on that. The state will not pay for these in-home care programs until you meet the resource limits. They're very strict on the resource limits. So a question that had come up last week was, well, how do I spend down, or like what's the appropriate way to spend down my resources, because we really need to consider, in-home care. We really need to consider a facility for a family member, yourself. And so you can spend it on yourself. You can spend it on your household. You can go on a cruise. You can pay off medical bills. You can get yourself a lift chair. You can't give away your money though. So you can't give it to charity or transfer $10,000 to my, cousin, because if you do, there's a 5-year look back period. The state will go back 5 years and they're able to see all these transactions through a report that they run called an asset verification report. And they will ask I saw that $25,000 was transferred last month before you applied. Can you let us know what that was for? Well, I donated it to charity, or I gave it to my brother. They will call that a transfer penalty. So they will calculate based on the amount, how long before you can apply for long-term care again. Because they say, well, you could have used that on your care. If you want to go on any in-home care services with Medicaid, you want to spend down your resources wisely and kind of keep track of them. So someone had a question back there?
So that includes gifting to your children, obviously.
Yeah.
Paying for their tuition.
Paying for tuition?
And that also includes.
I think you would have to spend it on, if it was your tuition that you made, or maybe your student loans or
And so the 5-year look back includes also transferring non-liquid assets like your house out of your name.
Yes, yep, good point. So that also, some people do decide that I'm gonna, chat with an attorney and maybe we're gonna transfer, our home, because I think down the road I'm, gonna need some support. Maybe I have, a disease that is chronic and that I'm going to decline, or, whatever it is. And you'll wanna, ideally chat with an attorney about transferring your resource, but then knowing that I won't be eligible for Medicaid for 5 years. Yeah, there's that 5-year look back period. So I know that's, on a positive note, the Mountain Tussauds programs don't have transfer penalties. So if you do, happen to you gift money in the past couple of months and you'd like to look into these supports under Mountain Tussauds, there's no transfer penalty for this program.
Are there some ways to protect your assets though, like in a trust, if you do that 5 years ahead of time?
with estate planning or?
So that one is a question for like an elder law attorney. It's usually recommended that you actually find an attorney that specializes in elder law, because they're going to be most like up to date on the rules. There are certain trusts that do count as a resource. So it would exclude someone, they would be over-resourced for applying, but it's just some trusts. And I don't have that knowledge.
Kathy and I recently visited some assisted living places down in Wenatchee, and one of them offered this piece where you can pay the regular, $6,000 or whatever $1,000 a month until you've spent down, and then you have your Medicaid room that they will reserve.
That is a great point.
But you definitely do want to make sure this one in particular didn't also have a memory care unit. So then that begs that question of like, oh, so I'm on Medicaid here, but if I needed to go into memory care,
yes,
I wouldn't have that option.
Point. Yeah. So some people, like if you have some resources and you're going to need to pay privately on your care, and let's say I have enough resources to pay privately for a year and a half, but then I'm going to need to apply for Medicaid so that Medicaid can start paying my $15,000 a month, bill. So you would want to take that into consideration when you're looking at facilities that, okay, I want to make sure this facility accepts both private pay and Medicaid. Because you don't want to have to move, and find a facility that, especially if you're happy where you're at, or if your family member's happy where they're at, you don't want to have to just uproot their lifestyle and their routine. So that's important to think about.
Does anyone know about how much this place costs per month, or even?
So they range.
I know, what's the range?
Average.
I'm gonna refer back to Mallory on that one.
Yeah, so Jamie's place is an average about $10,000 a month, and then so it's basically how much care you need. If you go in and you're pretty independent, but you just can't live at your home safely anymore, it's gonna be more towards the 6,000. If you need, almost one-on-one because you are, you're bedbound, you're not able to do anything for yourself, you can't feed yourself, you have, super advanced dementia, which Jamie's place can't really do right now, it's gonna go up towards the 12, 15. And Jamie's place is actually really reasonable when you're talking about long-term care facilities, but they also can't do, they don't have a memory care unit. So if you have that advanced dementia, you're gonna have to move somewhere like that. But so 6 to 15, I would say, is the range.
What about the place where you live?
Yeah, it was similar as Kathy here.
Yeah, one started at 6,000 and one started at like 6,500. But as soon as you needed any kind of extra help, well, that's a cost, that's a charge. So it bounces on up, And the other thing is, once you move from, when you do that pay down, you pay privately for the first however long you can do that, and then you qualify for Medicaid, you apply. You can stay in that facility, but they move you to a very different room. They have Medicaid rooms that are studios. So, you are basically downgrading your room, and which is not a big deal for a lot of people, but something to keep in mind. And it's a question to ask when you look at facilities.
Yeah,
Can I stay here?
Yeah.
And, do you have memory care, and do you change units and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I have some really good pamphlets and like guidelines, questions to ask, that if anyone is interested, please let me know and I can mail that out to you.
Is there anyone that you know or anybody here know about the VA?
So the VA is also a great resource to look into. if you, there's a lot of, steps and there's a lot of steps, but, there are a few resources, where people can help you with the process. And so if you are interested in those resources, let me know. Just talk to me after and I can take down your information or give you my card. The in-home care right now through the VA, they are, if you have a service-connected disability and need in-home care, it's usually a really good possibility. If you don't have a service-connected disability, there are programs that they can assess you for. And the VA does use the home care agencies, but also there's some flexibility to use individual providers as well. So that's also a great resource.
I was just gonna say that Tom with Veterans Affairs also comes to room 1 once a month. So if you do need to meet with someone, you're welcome to call room 1 and ask for me, Stephanie, and I can connect you.
Yes,
And then-
definitely do that.
Yeah, I'm realizing we are a couple minutes over time, so just want to be respectful of everyone's evenings and appreciate you all coming out, and thank you to our speakers.
I just want to say one thing as well, is that, we do have an opportunity here in this Met Howe Valley. We do already care for each other so much. And I think that there are creative ways to up our skill level as just community caregivers for one another. And so as we are building our network, come to us, talk to us with your ideas, with what you're facing, and we're together, we'll do better. So, and Betsy.
We also wanted to invite you all, as questions come up after these programs, to bring them to us. Please don't hesitate to send to Tracy. You should all have her email, any additional questions, and we'll feed them out to whoever is the most appropriate to answer them. So if you haven't gotten, as you ruminate about what you've heard tonight or from last week, or please bring your questions forward.
One more thing, Kathy, do you want to talk about your class real quickly?
Yeah, just to let you know, we have two things coming up in May. Caring for People Living with Dementia is a 4-week, once a week, 2 hours class. And that just helps kind of figure out what dementia is, what it looks like, how it progresses, how it's diagnosed, and then ways to communicate and engage with someone who's living with dementia. More challenging behaviors, that kind of thing, self-care as a caregiver, and death and dying process when someone's living with dementia. That's all included in that class. That's gonna start May 15th on Wednesdays for 4 weeks. And we also, I just wanted to let everybody know, 2 more things, sorry. We have a support group for caregivers for people living with dementia. That's normally the first Monday of every month at the Methodist Church from 2 to 3. May's going to be on May 13th. That's an exception, but it's normally the first Monday. So anybody who's living that life, come and share your story and get some support there. And Met Howe at Home is also doing volunteer training for people to do what we call social respite care, which is coming in and giving a full-time caregiver a break, a chance to step out and support themselves. And we are training our volunteers beyond our regular level of training. It's another 4-hour course there, and then they have to have their CPR and first aid. And then, so we've got our first 5 people trained on that. We've got I'm hoping another 5 coming through. So we want to add to that pool of people who can, on a volunteer basis, come in and help out. Spend time with your loved one while you step out a bit. And we can do up to 4-hour shifts, up to twice a week. So eventually, when we get enough people trained, we already have people from that first training who have hooked up with people they're helping out, and it's working beautifully. Yeah,
Just-
creative aging, if you wanna go into that, is another piece of,
Yeah. Well, you all are gonna be getting Met Houghton Homes newsletter, so you'll find out more things there. And one more shout out, there's a really great website called The Conversation Project. They have a lot of different guides for getting through that advanced care planning work, how to choose your health proxy, how to be a good health proxy. You never know when you're gonna be called upon to be somebody's proxy. And so that's a great resource, The Conversation Project. So check that one out as well. And thank you all so much. Thank you for being here.